Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to attend this very important program organized by Citizenship Engagement Group, the Gambia. This is another important activity of the organization since its inception, but they have an objective. They have a mission, and they have a vision. When they started initiating the organization, they were having behind their minds that this country is emerging from years of misrule. As a group of young people, we need to take a center stage in terms of advocacy for development across all fields and also political awareness. And what are those ingredients that we need to move as a nation? Are some of the issues that we are looking for. And across Africa and internally, sons and daughters of this continent have been trying to find answers to the African problems. Based on that, we thought it wise to invite one of Africa's finest sons to be invited to the Gambia to motivate us in our quest for national development. P.L.O. Lumumba, you are welcome to the Gambia. It is my honor and privilege. First, my name is Ansumana Diba, moderator for this program. I will kindly want to call upon Auntie Lishon to give us the opening remarks for this important occasion. Auntie, you are most welcome on stage.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for allowing me to do the opening remarks. Today is a special day. It's a wonderful day, and we are making history. Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of the Gambia, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and all protocols respectfully observed. The Citizen Engagement Group, CEG, is welcoming all compatriots as to this auspicious occasion. Citizen Engagement Group is a civil society organization with the aim and objective to add our quota to the awareness rising of the people. This group is concerned that our newfound democracy should be jealously guarded so that the process of democratization is not derailed in any way. We invited Professor P.L.O. Lumumba, a veteran educationist, political activist, and a Pan-Africanist. He has made it his preoccupation to bring knowledge and wisdom to the doorstep of Africans, so that Africa will make a leap forward. In this light, we are extremely delighted and thankful that the Gambian President has honored our invitation. He did this because of his deep desire to see the Gambia move forward and to encourage us, the young ones, to learn and take interest in our dear motherland. With these few remarks, I hereby invite Mrs. Adelaide Sose, a woman activist, a teacher, an educationist, and a mother, to come forward and talk to us about women in development. I believe all women in this country have heard her name, Mrs. Adelaide Sose. Her presentation will be followed by Professor Patrick Luch Othentio Lumumba. We thank you all for your attendance. Thank you for coming.
Good evening, they say good evening. Assalamu alaikum. That is better, that is nice. Now, what I want to really say before I even go into my discourse is to welcome our honored guest, but to tell him that people in the diaspora are so excited that he's here. Somebody called me from Abidjan and said, Auntie Adelaide, please tell him that I love him. People in America are asking, are you going? Even if I said I was not coming, I wouldn't dare say no, I'm not coming anymore, just because of that. Thank you, Isawun, for that introduction. I think Ansumana said to me, even before women were talking about women in development, you've been talking about women in development. And for me, it is the most debated theme in the world. I don't know why. It has gone through various stages of discussion. One minute we say women and development, then we change to women and development, then we say women, men and development, then we go on to, the theme keeps on changing, but always the focus is on one group, that is women. And for me, I find it difficult to understand why it is always women who are under the microscope when the world consists of both men and women. It dates back to creation. When God created Adam, he looked around and knew he was incomplete. And to make Adam complete, he created the woman. He created, the Muslims say Hawa, the Christians say Eve. So since then, woman was created. But up to today, how many centuries, billions of years after, we are still talking about women. So we, the women now, have to look at why, even though we are supposed to coexist with men in the development process, why is our existence and our participation always being questioned? Why? In spite of the fact that we play visible roles, if you look at the hall, the women are there, you see the woman camera woman, you see me, you see in this one who just gave the introductory remarks, but they want to make us invisible. We are not invisible, you know, we are highly visible. We are contributing our roles to society, and this is the dilemma. And why? Now, development is a continuous process that has started in its various shapes, as I said, from the start of humanity, but really has been taking greater hold in the 1990s with the creation of the Human Development Report, when UNDP presented its concept of human development and based it around the work of Ahmad Singh on human capabilities. And this he framed it around people being and people doing. Being means you are well fed, you are sheltered, you are healthy. Doing means you are educated, you are working, you are participating in community life, you are voting, you are leading. Since then, these different meanings have emerged in different forms. And now a paradigm shift came in, and instead of saying women and development, we talk about gender and development. Now this gender and development has been the main focus of the Millennium Development Agenda. It was passed in 2015, it finished in 2015, started in 2005, ended in 2015. Then in 2015, a new development agenda came again called the Sustainable Development Goals. I think you all know about that, and that is supposed to end in 2030, and again gender is the center place of this agenda. So the human development approach remains useful to articulating the objectives of development and improving people's well-being by ensuring an equitable, I underscore the word equitable, sustainable and stable planet. It is noteworthy that whatever approach is adopted, women are at the overall heart of the human development. Yet we continue to be domesticated, subjugated, marginalized, and excluded from mainstream development due to a number of misconceptions that really do not have a place in the context of the contemporary global world. This is one of the reasons that is cited as contributing to the underdevelopment of many African countries, including the Gambia. The Gambia, unfortunately, is classified as a least development country with a gross national income per capita of US 500 in 2012. It was ranked 175 out of 188 countries in the United Nations Development. They are always bottom of the ladder. The main sectors driving economic growth are the service sectors, agriculture and tourism. Agriculture accounts for around 25% of the GDP and provides work for 70% of the labor force. The industrial sector accounts for about 15% of GDP over the same period and consists mostly of construction and agro-processing activities. Services account for 60%, with trade and transport and communications being the two largest components. Tourism is Gambia's primary foreign exchange earner, and women play an important role in all these sectors. In the agricultural production of the country, they provide between 30 to 50% of the total agricultural force. Women comprise 78% of the economically active population who work in agriculture compared to just 57% of men. The majority of women farmers are unskilled agrarian wage earners and are responsible for about 40% of the total production in this country. The massive contribution does not translate to the desired improved social status for women. Their productive activities are mainly subsistence-based and for home consumption. Women are also active in horticultural production, which generates relatively good income. However, the income is often plowed back into activities to maintain their household. Their limited capacity and skills to work on viable agro-based and entrepreneurial skills, lack of ownership and control over productive resources such as land and modern agricultural equipment. It is really sad to see the obsolete tools that belong to the museums that women are still using, and this coupled with the triple roles of women impede all efforts for rural women to graduate. Women also play important roles in the informal sector and the formal sector. They are in the service sector, including the security services and production services. They are in research, academia. If you read the Young Talents, you discover the names of young women who are breaking barriers in the sciences and technology, in medicine and entrepreneurship. You have Gambian women who are in the global development agenda, in the United Nations agencies, African Development Bank, continental and regional institutions. You have women religious leaders and women philanthropists. So we're everywhere. But we are not a homogeneous group. So to expect us all to do the same thing is practically impossible. Because we come from diverse backgrounds, have different ideas, have different status. Some of us are educated, some are not educated, some live in the rural areas, some in the urban areas, some are old, some are young. We are diverse. But therefore we are expected to give our input according to the level of our competence. That is what matters, level of our competence. But what is important also is that we operate, the spaces that we operate from, we are giving the tools to do the job, the support, and to carry on our work without fear. The Gambia is a patriarchal society characterized by gender inequality. This is slowly changing, but gender inequality is still pervasive. Although women play a major socio-economic role in Gambian society, I have already said it, their access to productive resources is limited. Their rights to basic social services such as education, health, and information are violated, and their vulnerability to violence exacerbated by cultural bias and practices, and gender-based violence is increasing. Whether it is the reporting that is improving or whether it is the cases of gender-based violence that is increasing remains to be known. This has prompted the government to focus attention on women's empowerment through a series of actions dating back to 1980, when it established the Women's Bureau and the National Women's Council. Since then, it has put in place a number of measures, which include ratifying the CEDAW in 1992. The CEDAW is a convention on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. The establishment of a Women's Affairs Ministry in 1996. The establishment of a national policy for the advancement of Gambian women, which ran from 1999 to 2009. The enactment of the Trafficking in Children and Persons Bill in 2005. The development of a national gender and women empowerment policy, 2010 to 2020. The enactment of the Gender Mainstreaming and Women Empowerment Strategic Plan, 2010 to 2015. And the enactment of the Women's Act, which takes into consideration both the CEDAW and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights for the Rights of Women in Africa. The Act was amended in December 2015 to include the ban and criminalization of FGM and early child marriage. In spite of all these initiatives, however, women are still discriminated against, and their roles stereotyped, which are the leading causes of poverty and social vulnerability. The Department of Health of State Statistics 2013 preliminary report shows maternal mortality rates of 433 women to 100,000 lives. The crude birth rates and the crude death rates are estimated at 46% and 19% per 100,000 respectively. Infant mortality rate at 34 per 1,000 life births. And under 5 mortality, still high, 109 per 1,000 life births. In carrying out the role, the society expects them to carry out, that is, bring children into the world. Women lose their lives in the process. Is that really fair in this day and age? When you go to deliver a baby, the health facilities are inadequate to deal with emergencies. I have a colleague who has been complaining all this week that when he took his maid to the hospital to deliver a baby, they asked her to go home within 1 hour. He could not understand why she should go home within 1 hour. And the medical staff said, but we need this bed for somebody else. He's a man, so he's a gender-sensitive man, and he's been complaining about this thing all week. But it's inadequate services that are creating these sort of problems. Now, although breastfeeding is universally practiced in the Gambia, only 34% of mothers practice exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months, and complementary feeding does not provide children with adequate nutrition. To encourage women to do exclusive breastfeeding, the Gambian government gave women maternity leave of 6 months, but women are being penalized for going on maternity leave for 6 months. Not openly, but the private sector are not employing them. If a young woman and a young man comes, they choose the young man in favor of the young woman because they will say she's going to have babies very soon and she will go on 6 months maternity leave. If the women do not have babies, will they have future people to work in their banks and in their private sector? They just see the immediate returns today. They don't see the returns of tomorrow. So these are things that we women have to be cognizant of and fight to ensure that our rights, when given to us by government, are respected and maintained. Now coming back to this breastfeeding thing, it shows that malnutrition also, because the mothers who are going to work are not taking care of their children properly. There are high malnutrition rates, but this is especially high in the LGAs of Kuntawu, Janjanjaburi, Karawan, and Basel. Kuntawu has the highest prevalence of global, not Gambian only, acute malnutrition and stunting, while urban rates are not as high, Banjul and environments. But if people know what stunting does to children, it affects their cognitive growth and development. They cannot learn properly, they cannot participate in school, and with a weak population, how is your country going to grow and develop? Thus, we need to involve both men and women in the development process. This is intended to reverse the huge prevailing inequalities and injustices. Without the participation of women, it is recognized that these inequalities and disparities will deepen. In spite of some progress in getting more women in decision-making processes in the Gambia, it is evident we are far from reaching the internationally agreed targets. The composition of the National Assembly is a good example of the Gambia's defaulting in living up to its international commitments. The female representation of 10.34% falls far below the 33% that is required. There are only 6 women NAMs out of an assembly of 58. At the ministerial level, there is only 21 female representation, that is 4 ministers out of 19. This does not tell well for the Gambia, especially when it is compared to countries like Rwanda, which has a percentage of 63.8% of women in their parliament, the highest worldwide, and the most recent statistics from Senegal, which shows 41.8%, ranking 6th in the world. They're just next door. Political commitment and policies are prerequisites for women's progress in political representation. I read all those policies that government has developed, all those acts, and we're saying it's a prerequisite, but is it impacting? There is a huge gap between policy and practice, between laws and practice. Implementation is very weak in the Gambia. We are not walking the talk in terms of meeting commitments to gender parity. Now, given the patriarchal nature of society, as well as local and international institutions, where it is largely believed that men will be better leaders than women, it will not be easy for women to take up leadership positions, whether in politics, in the corporate world, or even in civil society. Since rarely do the powerful give up power easily. It is important that efforts to include women in the governance structure is not seen as a power struggle. We are not struggling with women, but as a moral issue that is embedded in human rights. Why? Because we have a right to be heard. We have a right to be seen. We have a right to participate in decision-making processes on matters that affect our lives. Because most members of the dominant structures in government, and in business, and the private sector, and in civil society, and the traditional structures are men, it is not envisaged that they will readily relinquish their power. Now, how do we go about claiming this right to bring about an equitable society through power sharing? First of all, it is important that we recognize those visible and invisible barriers that are holding us back and dismantle them as we navigate our way through the labyrinth. It's a labyrinth, it's a maze. We have to navigate until we want to get where we want to get. Now, these barriers are so strong that women have called them by different names. I'm sure you've all heard the glass ceiling, breaking the glass ceiling. You know, when you want to break a glass ceiling, the glass will break, all your hair will bleed, all your body will cut. So this is the experience of women. This is what they suffer. Others call it the brick wall. It's like knocking your head against a brick wall to get where we want to. I've also talked about the labyrinth. All these contribute to the myriads of challenges that we face when we want to rise up in the corporate ladder, in politics, in civil society, wherever it is. It is not a lack of skills or talents or experience. As I look around the room, I see many talented young women, lots of experience, who have a lot to offer, but they're being pushed out. So it is not that we do not have women, we do not have capable women. Right now today, we have the Vice President, we have the Ministers of Trade, Culture, Education, the Speaker of the National Assembly, parliamentarians, heads of departments, permanent secretaries. We also had them in the past. But as Nayseka has said, Nayseka is the disabled youth lady who's in the National Assembly. She says Nayseka, being disabled, being in the National Assembly, is not enough. She doesn't want tokenism. She cannot influence the change that she wants because the bill that has been there for people with disabilities, not only women with disabilities, but people with disabilities, she cannot even get to be tabled at the National Assembly. And if we tell you what we had to fight to get this Women's Act through Parliament, I've just said it was in 2015 that they brought in FGM and early childhood marriage, sorry. That was the compromise we had to make. If we did not compromise, that bill would never have passed through Parliament. They said, remove these are our traditional cultures, these are traditional laws, you have to remove them. We wanted an act. So we allowed those things all to be removed, but thank God, they have all come back in. So we have to navigate. We have to know when to compromise and when not to compromise. The institutionalized, structurally characterized and organizational practices will always be there for us to fight with. We must never, ever, however, compromise our rights, no matter how difficult it is. I gave the example of maternity leave. The men are giving paternal leave. Unfortunately, my dear brothers, I think they only get 10 days or 5 days, I'm not even sure. They get just a very small one compared to the 6 months that we get. But during that period, they're not penalized for not going to work. In fact, some of them don't even help the wife to be baby. They're doing other things, and that is why they were giving the leave. But still, they've got from, how do you call it, the leave. We thank government for giving, or the private sector, or whatever it is. So we women, at this time, we are not complaining against discrimination in this one, because we have what we want to do. But I'm also asking the women that are discriminated against, denied promotion, denied, how do you call it, leave. You know, when you have your 6 months leave, then you have got other leaves in between. If you ask for it, they say, no, you went for 6 months, what do you want? You want to go on study leave, they say no. But have women ever complained? Have you ever seen a Gambian woman take a private sector to a tribunal for denying them their rights? You always just accept everything that is put on us. And it is now time for us to say, no, we have stopped accepting. This is our right. Government gave it to us. It's in the Act. We go by the Act. We go by the policies. So please, young men and women. And you know, when you start, other women will come out. But if no one bears the cat, it will never come out in the open. So as we strive for leadership, it shouldn't be a means of gaining status. We women, when we strive for leadership, I'm very proud of the role that the women fought. The young people are claiming the role that they played, but there were very dynamic women there also who fought for the change process, who were imprisoned, who were beaten, who were whatever it is. But what I'm saying to those women is once you get the leadership position, you don't do it for status, or for self-interest, or worst of all, to think that you are stronger or better than all the others. It means that you contributed to accomplishing a positive goal in society, and that you are meant to benefit a large number of other people, but not yourself. In the Gambia, however, The dominant leadership style, particularly over the past 2 decades, has been the autocratic leadership style, which seems to have stepped from the top down, and everyone was so engrossed in maintaining the status quo that they could not distinguish between right and wrong, between good and bad, and what was good for the collective good. It was all egocentric, everybody trying to cover themselves. Now the question I'm asking here is, can Gambian women leaders make a difference? We are calling for women in leadership. Can we make a difference? We are found in all levels, the community, the national level, the political level, the global level, and in all sectors, education, health. But have we a might to be recognized as truly transformative leaders in the sense of the word? If you are accusing the men of not being transformative, are we the women transformative? Once Gambian women have been supported to develop their leadership identities, it is expected that they can make a difference. Having been on the receiving end for so long, it is expected that they will stand up for the human rights of others and for just and equitable societies. An important first step is that women must first of all acknowledge that they can make a difference. They must have a clear motive for wanting to be political leaders in the first place. If they're embarking on this journey for other reasons, other than the ones that I have just said, then they will not live up to expectations, and it will not be long for people to know that they are there for themselves and not for the collective good. Believing from the heart that we want to make a difference means that they have to say yes to integrity. Integrity is paramount to their beliefs. They have to dream big, to collaborate, to trust their colleagues, to face difficult challenges, to set the example, and to learn from others. It's not possible for everybody to know everything. We learn from others all the time. Having accepted to do this, there are certain things that women need to do. They have to set clear standards. Somebody asked me, I haven't seen you for a long time, I said I was just tired of this country and I left. He said, why? Because I just saw all our standards falling. We grew up in a society where we had strict morals embedded on us. Truth, honesty, accountability, all this disappeared. Now, if our women leaders are coming, they have to set clear standards that this is the one path we want to take. They must expect the best and pay attention to the people around them, pay attention to their environment. They must tell the story of how they went there and how they got there, and allow other people to tell their story. Because if the story is not told, they will just see you in a position up there and they think you didn't suffer to get there. You suffered, you cried, you sacrificed, you compromised, you did all sorts of things. I'm not saying that you allow yourself to be sexually harassed. No. I'm saying that you tell the story of your own personal sacrifices to get where you want to be. You give personal recognition. I am tired and sick and fed up of seeing the pull her down syndrome. If a woman is getting up there, just open the internet. They say the most terrible things about each other. Is that what we need? Instead of pulling each other up, we are pulling each other down. The men they have their old school, we call it the old school boy type. They support each other. They don't pull each other down, that I can assure you. When they are together, they support each other. So you women, learn, take a page from the men and learn and support each other. And be there for each other. Celebrate. We need to celebrate each other. Somebody has a big, successful enterprise. Let us celebrate the person. Let us celebrate our women leaders. Let us celebrate our women entrepreneurs. And let us, above all, set the example. If we are in public offices, we have to influence the change from within. It is the women who need to influence that change, not to say, this is how I saw it being done. This is, or I was afraid to say anything. Why should you be afraid of speaking the truth? So, we need to mentor the ones that are already there. Mentor and coach those that we want to take up those positions, and providing avenue to instill values and cultivate women in ethical leadership roles. The unfortunate imbalance in the treatment of women in the workplace, if women do not take the bull by the horns, will continue to persist. There is enough evidence to show that when women participate in decision making, many children, are likely to go to school and stay in school. The child and maternal mortality rates will reduce, the family health will improve, and that food security and environmental sustainability will increase. Need we justify any longer that we are capable, that we are competent, and that we are capable of doing the job? I leave that question to you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Auntie Adel Sose. Last week before I left the office, I saw a very old camera, JVC, that heavy one. It was archived, I think. But when I went through the files and I asked Mr. Tal and a few others, it was some of them, as a former director of Worldview, we are training women to handle media equipment, training on video making. And they were toying the length and the breadth of this country, empowering women. Thank you very much. Women empowerment. Sometimes the right stories are not, we don't read it in books. If you read the former president of the Gambia, Sir Dawda, in his book, Kairaba, he said, when the Gambia wanted to attain republicanism, in order for us to have total separation of powers, the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary, there was a need for a referendum. And there were people in this country at that time who were saying, no, we still want the Prime Minister to stay, the Governor General to stay. And he traveled to the North Bank, and the women of Sabah said, go on, campaign, we will support you. It is in his book, but you don't see it anywhere in the history books of this country. It means that to attain the 1970 Constitution, it also means that to attain republicanism, women played a key role. Thank you very much for the deliberation, and I'm sure the new dispensation will actually work with all women and institutions to ensure that our goals and our aspirations for women in this country are attained. I will, at this juncture, like to invite a Kenyan national, a Pan-Africanist, a former director of Kenyan Anti-Corruption Commission, a well-known orator of the 21st century, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, law lecturer, faculty at the University of Nairobi, a trustee of the executive trustee of the Institute of African Leaders and Leadership of Nairobi and Kenya. He is also an adjudicator of smooth justice. And before I invite him to the podium, I would like to tell you that the Constitution of the Gambia, Chapter 1, states the sovereignty of the Gambia resides in the people of the Gambia, and from whose organs and from whom all organs of government derive their authority, and in whose name and for whose welfare and prosperity the powers of government are to be exercised in accordance with the Constitution. I said this because you are a legal practitioner, to actually tell you that we have a very noble objective that is stated in Chapter 1 of our Constitution, and he will be deliberating on the topic, the impact of corruption on the African continent. Professor Lumumba, you are welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. First, let me say how very grateful I am to be present here in the Gambia. The younger generation may not know how the name the Gambia came about. We were discussing with him as we drove yesterday from Dakar in Senegal. But you will know that there was a debate in those very early years that there was the possibility of confusing Gambia with Zambia, and that therefore, to ensure that such confusion did not arise, your country was christened the Gambia. And that is unique in the sense that you are the only country in the world that has the definite article "the" as part of our name. And I remember as a very young man that your first president was one of the leading figures in Africa, Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara. And you may take it for granted, but part of the reason why a country such as yours, whose population is not very big, hosts a number of continental organizations, are to be attributed to the first generation leaders of the Gambia. I also, at the very outset, wish to express my profound and heartfelt gratitude to the Gambians in the diaspora, Musa and Abu Bakr, who are resident in the United States of America, who have been in touch with me since the month of December. Indeed, I was supposed to be present here in the month of December, but owing to other engagements, we said that we would be present in the month of February. And I'm very glad because I'm in touch with quite a number of young Gambians who are very keen on the continent of Africa and her success. And I'm glad that my presentation has been preceded by that of Madam Adelaide, in the sense that some of the words she has deliberately and appropriately utilized can be utilized in the context of Africa. It is true that indeed women in Africa have not been allowed to play their rightful role. So that it is legitimate to say that they ought to break the glass ceiling. It is equally legitimate to say that they are facing a brick wall in very many areas of their endeavor. It is equally true that they have to navigate their way in the labyrinth of cultural practices and legal hurdles that stand in their way. But it is also true that those words can be used in respect of the continent of Africa and the African peoples. Africa continues to punch below her weight in the economic arena, in the political arena, in the social arena. There are many Afro-pessimists who hold the view that Africa will never stand alongside other civilizations as a prosperous continent. There are those who look at Africa and only see the negatives, but yet Africa is great in prospect. Today, we are the youngest continent in the world in terms of the complexion of our demography. As we drove yesterday from Dakar in Senegal on our way to Banjul, the Gambia, I saw young men and women playing on the road, some riding horses, some tending the animals, some working in the salt pans. And I posed the rhetorical question to my brother Adam: what is the future of these young men 20 years from today? When the statistics were given to you this afternoon about maternal mortality, about infant mortality, about the crude death rates, about the per capita income of Gambia, which could be said of very many African countries, what ran through my mind is how can we reverse this trend? The issues that people debate at different forums are such that sometimes we look at them as if they were merely academic. When we talk about the GDP of Africa, the 55 African countries combined, I say 55 because I know Morocco will want us to say 54, because in their mind the Sahrawi ought not to be recognized. When we talk about the GDP of Africa at about 2 trillion United States dollars, when we talk about the per capita income of various African countries, the question that we must ask: why is it that the continent has failed to realize better development? The combined GDP of the continent of Africa is smaller than the GDP of the Federal Republic of Germany. Remember that we are nearly 1.7 billion of us in the 55 odd countries. Germany, with a population of slightly above 80 million, has a GDP of nearly 4 trillion. Norway, with a population of no more than 6 million, has a sovereign fund, money that is just kept away for future generations, of $1 trillion, so that notionally Norwegians yet to be born already have money to their credit. Not even born, not even conceived. In fact, Norwegians whose parents have not yet been born, notionally have an allocation. But for the African continent, even little children whose parents have not been born have a debt on their head. The question is, how has this come about? And it's important to say at the very outset that perhaps we have analyzed the African problem for too long, and that perhaps we ought not to continue to engage in analysis. But yet there is wisdom in reminding ourselves that when our founding fathers were in the forefront of the struggle for independence, the clarity in their mind was that independence did not simply mean the acquisition of new names in respect of certain countries, or the raising of flags, or the composition of national anthems. No, it did not mean that. It meant that we were releasing ourselves from the chains of slavery and the chains of colonization so that we could utilize our resources to benefit our people and to improve the quality of the lives of the people. If you look at the early leaders in the independent days, and I many times go back to the 32 speeches delivered in 1963 by the 32 heads of states and government who assembled in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, you listen to each one of them. It was amazing, even the ones that did not govern very well, the clarity with which they thought. If you listen, and I was just reading some of the speeches that were given by some of the leaders who were removed very quickly, such as Amadou Ahidjo of the Cameroons, the clarity with which he thought and articulated the vision that although we of the Cameroons were colonized by the French partly and by the British partly, we are combining our efforts so that we can improve the quality of our education, so that we can improve the quality of our health services, so that we can improve infrastructure. I'm picking Ahidjo essentially because the Cameroons now is in the midst of problems. We know, for example, that the Cameroons are now divided paradoxically and ironically between the English-speaking and the French-speaking. Africa remains the only continent in the world which still refers to ourselves as Francophone and Anglophone. No other continent does that. If you ask the Cameroons now, have we realized the promises that we gave ourselves at the time of independence? The answer is no. If you went to yet another country that is in the throes of problems, Guinea-Bissau, those of you who are a little older, or those of you who are keen historians, will remember an African nationalist who is not remembered as he should be, Amilcar Cabral. Amilcar Cabral was one of the greatest freedom fighters in the continent of Africa. And when you read some of the things that he said in those early days, you'll be amazed at the clarity with which he thought. Yet today we know that Guinea-Bissau is not moving in the direction that it ought to. Another country that one can pick in order to demonstrate how we have failed to realize our potential is Mali. You remember at that time it was called the Sudan. And one of the greatest leaders to come out of that part of the world was Modibo Keïta. Modibo Keïta was one of the few individuals from the former French colonies, together with Ahmed Sékou Touré, who in those very early days stood against the French and said, we do not want some French, we want freedom. And one can go on in identifying the countries, and one can see that in quite a number of countries things have not gone in the right direction. But there are countries which, since the attainment of political independence, have also made useful strides, and there are changes that have happened visibly and things that ought to be celebrated. But the truth be told, Africa has things that ought to be celebrated. When we drove from Dakar, Senegal to Banjul, the Gambia, the road was moderate. That is a good thing. When we took the ferry, I saw the new ferry, the Kunta Kinte. I didn't take it. Perhaps next time I will. But there is a sense in which one can see that certain things are happening. I stayed in a hotel where there was electricity throughout the night, and that is a good thing. Today you can take it for granted that there is electricity. A few years there was no electricity. So that there are good things to be celebrated, but yet there is a sense in which we must ask ourselves, could we have done better? And the answer is, we could have done much better. And the question is, why have we not done as we should have? And the answer is one that we are familiar with. Madam Adelaide has in some ways demonstrated why. We have for too long ignored a very important segment in our society, the female of the species. And I remember it is the American Abraham Lincoln who said that you cannot have a society that grows half slave and half free. He said it in respect of the slaves and the free, but we can say it in respect of men and women. You cannot have 50% of your population excluded from politics, excluded from economics, excluded from societal activities, and only recognized for purposes of tokenism, and you expect to succeed. You cannot. Yes. The other unfortunate thing is that we, even those in leadership, say this forcefully, are back to the basics. And what are the basics? The basics are that having recognized that part of the reason why we have not realized our potential is because we have excluded women, we must ask what is the other reason, and the other reason is corruption. You know, several years ago, I was in Uganda, and I made a presentation about the subject of corruption. And during the question time, a Ugandan rose from the audience and said that he had listened to me very carefully. And after listening to me very carefully, he agreed with 99% of what I've said about and against corruption. But he disagreed with me on one thing. He said there is no corruption in Africa, contrary to what I've said. And I was stunned and taken aback. He said in Africa there is looting, not corruption. And he proceeded to make a distinction between looting and corruption. And he said that corruption presupposes that there is some modicum of intelligence in the manner in which you steal. But looting is the most blatant form of theft, and we had better call it looting. Several years ago, again, not even years, last year, I was in Monrovia, Liberia, and a great Liberian, Boima Fanbule, who made a presentation after I did, said, we have long referred to this thing called theft as corruption. And when we call it corruption, people don't think that these perpetrators are thieves. We had better call it theft on an industrial scale. And I agree with both of them. But yet, there is a sense in which we rationalize corruption. In Africa, many individuals condemn corruption not because they hate it, but because they lack the opportunity to participate in it. The day they get the opportunity to participate in it, that is the day they go quiet. I remember when I was the director of Anti-Corruption Authority, we were about to arrest a cabinet minister, and a friend of ours asked, but this cabinet minister used to speak about and against corruption, what happened? And the friend told me, you only make noise when your mouth is empty. When your mouth is full, how can you make noise? And we were discussing this in Africa, there are different ways. There are those who participate in corruption and they don't think that is wrong. And he very aptly told me, my friend here, that there is a saying, whether you are talking about the Mandinka or the Wolof or the Fulani, they say that a sheep grazes where it is tied. And that is how but I told him, no, you must not graze where you are tied because the grass is not yours. In fact, you are not a sheep. And number two, you are employed there to take care of the grass. You are custodian and a trustee of the grass, or what you refer to as grass. And I'm submitting to us that the issue that we must talk about, and as I grow older and I interact with corruption, I think that there is a spiritual dimension to this thing called corruption. I was telling an audience of mine that even if you are a Christian, read the Bible. The Bible is clear that corruption is a bad thing, whether it's in the Old Testament, whether it's in the New Testament. When you read the Holy Quran, I think it is Al-Baqarah, at verse 188, go and read it. Those of you who are Muslims, Al-Baqarah. You'll find a clear statement that you shall not partake of that which is not yours. And yet, we are Christians. We go to churches on Saturdays, on Sundays, and indeed when we are baptized as Christians, we say we reject the devil with all his works, and the following day we are dining with the devil with very short speech. We are Muslims. We pray 5 times a day with the Qibla to the holy city of Mecca. We attend the Salat al-Jum'ah, and immediately we come out of the mosque, we are engaged in theft on an industrial scale. So that this thing also undermines our Christianity. It undermines our being Muslims. It undermines our belief in a being that we worship called God. What is it? In our societies, in different parts of Africa, we recognize and condemn theft. Yet when we give individuals the opportunity to serve us and they engage in theft, we celebrate them. We know all these. There are those who, when we talk about corruption, say that corruption is a victimless crime. How can a crime be without victims? When we talk about corruption, some individuals in government ask, and whose goat have I stolen? Is it your goat? The answer is, you are stealing our goats. What one is saying is that corruption has undermined the growth and development of the continent of Africa. This is the richest continent on earth. I always imagine to myself, on the day of creation when the world was void and without form, and God created the world, if there is a continent that He blessed so much, it is this one. If you look at the resources, the water resource, the rivers in Africa, look at the Gambia. The world is now suffering. Cape Town in South Africa, Nairobi in Kenya, Windhoek in Namibia is worrying about the shortage of drinking water. You have plenty of water here. The world and even yourselves are worrying about electricity and electricity generation. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, if you harness the resources of the Inga Dam, the entire continent of Africa would be lit. We are worrying, the world is now worried about winter in China, in the United States of America, and in other parts of the world. Our Sahara is receiving more sunshine than anywhere else in the world. If you harness solar power there, the entire Africa would be lit. Africa does not manufacture nor utilize any nuclear energy, yet the ingredients that are used in nuclear power are to be found here in Niger. They are to be found in